Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about photochemical smog and thermal inversions. This is a thermal inversion. It's basically when warm air gets trapped between two layers of cold air, and the warm air keeps all of the pollutants and gases that are in the layer below. It keeps them in the layer below, and it acts like a lid. Inversion layer is what I just said, a layer of warm air. It traps the pollutants and the air beneath it and prevents the cool air to rise and, go where it's supposed to be in the atmosphere. Um, Pollution gets like trapped. It can't mix with anything above it, and it has to stay there. And the concentration of the pollution just keeps on increasing and increasing, and it becomes a huge health hazard for the people living under the thermal inversion layer. And it just gets more and more polluted like the longer the inversion layer is there. So the top is a normal area. The cold air is above the warm air because it's in the troposphere, and the air gets warmed and cooled, and there's a convection current going on, and the pollutants funnel out and they rise up, and they don't stay in that one little pocket of air and just grow extremely large in concentration. And in the bottom, it's a thermal inversion where there's a warm lid of air that traps all of the pollutants and everything in there, and they can't rise up and get out of that warm layer of air, so the pollutants just stay in there, and they accumulate and just stay in the air below the thermal inversion layer, which like acts like a lid above the pollutants. So smog is smoke, and fog, it's basically just a bunch of nasty pollutants and nasty particles in the air just forming together, and creates like a thick blanket of like black or brown, and it kind of like messes with vision. It reduces sunlight. It causes like haze and stuff like that, and it's just a mixture of particulate matters and harmful pollutants and chemicals. It can be natural or it can be anthropogenic. There's London smog and there's photochemical smog. One is in cool, damp weather, and the other one forms in sunny and like bright, sunny weather. And photochemical smog is like the sources of it are gasoline and combustion, which make nitrogen oxides, ozone, and hydrocarbons. And London smog, the sources of it are like coal and oil, which creates particulate matters and sulfur oxides. Um, Industrial smog is basically like London smog. It has soot in it. It has sulfur dioxide, sulfates, carbon monoxide, and like carbon dioxides. It's smog. It's from industrial fossil fuel power plants, like point source pollutions, which means they directly pollute the environment from like power plants and just industrialized industrial areas. Um, they burn like sulfur-rich oil or like coal, and they create things like sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide, sulfuric acid, ammonium sulfate, and they burn fossil fuels as well, which leads to carbon dioxide forming, carbon monoxide, being released into the atmosphere, and like soot particles of carbon. And in 1952 in London, it killed over 4,000 people. This industrial smog. Um, the next type of smog is photochemical smog, which is it's called brown air smog because it makes the air brownish orange, and it needs sunlight to like be formed. It needs it to be bright and sunny and hot outside, and so it just because the reaction of the sunlight with the pollutants is what forms photochemical smog. It contains ozone from the troposphere, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds. Hot, sunny days, that's what it needs, and it's mostly caused by mobile like sources such as cars and trucks and things that pollute nitrogen oxides and VOCs. It can also be trapped by things like inversion layers, which I talked about earlier, and it can also be trapped by mountains and the geography. So if the city's in a valley and like surrounded by mountains, it traps the pollutants and the photochemical smog in the area. Ozone, great up high. I mean, we need it in the stratosphere. We burn. It protects us from ultraviolet rays from the sun, and it's very great in the stratosphere. We need it to live. But in the troposphere, it can be a bad air pollutant, and it can be a threat to our human health and just our environment. Well, not our environment. Never mind. The concentration of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds build up from cars and trucks and vehicles, and midday ultraviolet rays, they increase the catalyzation process of the photochemical reactions, which create ozones and pans, and levels stay high throughout the afternoon because once the sun's rising and bright and shining down, it creates this photochemical smog and exacerbates this process of creating photochemical smog from these pollutants. But once the sun sets and lowers down, the process like slows down and stops because it needs sunlight to form ozone and break up nitrogen dioxide.